Hey there, welcome to the TBH with Toby B, Hemingway, that's me, podcast. This is the July 2024 digest, where I wrap up all the stories that I wrote for the month on my Substack, which you can subscribe to, of course, at tbhemingway.substack.com. Do I sound a little rough? I feel a little rough. It's this month, man. Wow. In terms of the writing, things turned, I guess, political, for lack of a better word. I mean, not so much political, but very much considering America, my place in America, what it's like to be in America. It was a good month for that. 4th of July probably kicked it off. You get thinking about those things, and then, wow, did it just ramp up from there. So I'm exhausted. If it sounds like I'm exhausted, well, yeah, I am. But writing about that stuff got me thinking about a piece that I wrote on Instagram back in 2020. Posted this on election day, actually, 2020. So I thought I'd read it for you. This wound up in my book that I published earlier in the year, Red Sun, Dandelions and Other Stories. And I thought it fit kind of well with the pieces that you'll hear next from the Substack this month. So here it is. It's called America, in parentheses, 2020. The first time I went to New York City, I took a bus from JFK. They let us out at a red light in Harlem. It was a bright summer day. I saw a man dressed in a suit, briefcase at the end of his stiff arm, crossing the street in long strides, like he was headed to the most important meeting of his life, only in a dream where he'd never make it. A dog got loose and spun through the intersection, running between his legs. Horns honked, people screamed. I was sweating already. This was America. 25 years later, it feels more normal, until lately. This morning I sat on Sunset Boulevard in the mist, palm trees faintly dotting the hills. I saw a dog being pushed in a stroller. A homeless man lunged onto the road, screaming at a bus, maybe at the driver, but the doors were all closed. The stench of new asphalt drifted from the parking lot nearby. I had that feeling again. This is America. What's next? There's the piece, America 2020. Again, you can get that in the collection Red Sun, Dandelions and Other Stories, which is on my website, tbhemingway.com. And if you already have it, thanks a lot. Yeah, so that's how I was feeling 4 years ago, and I guess how I was feeling, gosh, when was the first time I went to New York City? When I was 19, I think. And with the election around the corner, I'm feeling it again. You just don't know what's next. And I guess that's what I wrote about on and off this month, amongst other things, because it was one of those months. So I hope you've had a good one. I hope your summer's been good if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. And thanks for listening. Please subscribe to this wherever you're listening to podcasts, or also subscribe to the Substack. I'd love to have you there. I publish a story every week, at least I try to. And I'm going to put this together every month. So thanks again. Enjoy the stories. And you'll hear from me again next month. Last one up, Turn Out the Lights. From July 4, 2024. Editorial note, this one sounds a little different. It's because, again, I was on the road recording on my iPhone. I can't recall a more surreal 4th of July. It feels like we've stayed up too late. Like the country wandered deep into a hall of carnival mirrors 8 or 9 years ago, and now we can't find our way back out. Aging is on the collective mind. Our elderly president is badly ailing, his mean old opponent ever more maniacally railing. And every week it seems that the Supreme Court plunges us deeper into some sort of comic version of our own worst belligerent impulses. Not even my beloved Los Angeles Lakers, helmed by the league's own Father Time, can hold it together anymore. One of America's greatest liberties, in my opinion anyway, is stupidity. Some countries have laws to protect people from their own dumbness, but to do so here would be considered plainly un-American. Yesterday, I saw a man driving a new Jeep with its doors removed, which always shocks me on the lunatic roads of LA. On the back window was one of those dumb stickers of a blacked-out American flag with coloured lines, code for some lives mattering, just not black ones. There was a real American flag too, large and limp, strapped to the back bumper. An increasingly common flourish for the 4th, which I find so violent that I begin to wish flags didn't exist. In the front sat a boy, no older than 9, his bare knobbly knees rocking back and forth in the summer breeze. The licence plate read, Broseph. Your Honour, I rest my case. Later on our drive south for the holiday, I saw someone unfurling a Robert Kennedy Jr. for President banner along an overpass above the freeway. Perhaps they saw their opportunity to snare a few Biden voters after his disastrous week. Why not? RFK Jr. will try anything. I've never seen an American more desperate to believe in something, anything, other than life's cruel realities. So much so, he just makes things up. A more and more popular tactic. Now the family and I have safely arrived to see the in-laws in San Diego, where the women are all a little too tan for their skin type and the men a little too thick for their branded t-shirt size. If I'm honest, I don't like it here. Home to military bases, colleges and endless surf breaks, this city suffers from what I've dubbed the triple bro problem: jarheads, frat boys and surfers. Brosefs everywhere. Bars are like boxing rings, blood-stained and plain. Driving is an act of war. Our Mexican neighbours, at a border so close you can see it, are almost invisible. It's impossible to escape the camouflage clutches of corporate America, in every restaurant and corner store meekly feigning mom-and-pop charm. But the gang's all here, the local beer is excellent, and the sun's always shining. So I'll take a few days to try to forget. Soak myself in sun and suds before letting the fireworks blast my brain like a Men in Black memory eraser. Happy birthday, America. Now, it's time for bed. Oh Say Did We See, from July 11, 2024. If you've ever been to a large corporate hotel when it's at its very busiest, perhaps on a 4th of July weekend, somewhere close to the ocean, then you'll know what it's like to try catching some rest in an oversold commercial jetliner standing on its tail, or a grounded cruise ship riddled with half-naked stowaways. So many people, so far from the comforts of such disparate homes, testing the limits of generic architecture, while overwhelming a staff of well-dressed yet indifferent semi-professionals wondering why they didn't get the holiday too. In short, you're in for a bumpy ride, and no smile to the receptionist or tip for the bellboy can save you from your fate. You might try arriving a little early, before the official check-in time, and leave your bags with the desk while the cleaners ready your adjoining rooms. You may even decide to check out the pool in the meantime, the one from the online photos that the kids have been dying to cannonball into for days. Yet there too, no respite can be found. Just hundreds of your fellow guests, as we're all seemingly called now, everywhere from Target to an emergency room, stripped down to their sun-blistered skin, greedily saving deck chairs lined edge to edge, with complimentary white towel after complimentary white towel, each in a different state of chlorine and booze-scented dampness. Okay, you'll think, I at least must be able to get a drink around here, and start looking for the nearest bar. Indeed, this is where the true professionals are found, absent-mindedly glancing at sports on TV, motioning to the barkeeps like blackjack players, with little more than a wave of a hand. An occasional poorly phrased joke thrown in, just to keep the wheels of commerce like their livers, well oiled. While you wait to be served, you'll probably see someone being 86'd by the bar manager, both dressed head to toe in American flag apparel, of course, one steady as the stars and stripes from the moon landing, the other starting to flutter erratically in the breeze. The latter human flag will mount an uneven, slurred defence and fail. At that moment, a kind of sour relief and curdled pride will wash over you. It could be worse, you'll finally think. You could be that person. Maybe, halfway through your second margarita, you'll wonder if you are in fact that person, and furthermore, why the front desk still hasn't texted you with your room information an hour after check-in time. But that thought will most likely be yanked out of your head by the 6-year-old tugging on your sleeve, begging to get into the water. You'll have to zigzag through the rows of deck chairs and their near comatose tenants to find just one of the pools, where less athletic parents sit with only their feet in the water and watch their children do anything and everything other than swim in 3.5 feet of suspiciously opaque liquid.
Your daughter may well ignore all of this and swim back and forth across the pool, dodging tiny footballs and drinking men and unmoored float toys and canoodling teenagers, from one curve of its wobbly edge to the next, the smile somehow never leaving her face, even in all that chaos. Now you will thank nameless gods for chlorine, then wonder what it would take, beyond your daughter drowning, to get you into that pool, and eventually come up with nothing. Nothing else would be worth it. The rooms still won't be ready. A fear might rise in you that the bar-side guacamole, disappearing fast, is dinner. Your children will giggle at the prospect of room service, and you will frown. If you're lucky, your spouse is a serious person who likes nothing better than to take control of a situation, whether at work or a school picnic. She will head to the front desk. Your phone will soon ping with her status updates, telegrams from the battlefront. The sheer number of guests has rendered the whole room reservation system almost useless. Beleaguered staff have resorted to oiling the squeakiest wheels. The promised rooms have been given away. Your representative is bargaining for better. Various elevations of management must be ascended. Find the right manager, and that approach works. You will have somewhere to sleep and watch the fireworks. Alas, the two rooms will go from adjoining to being in completely separate towers. Best to pick one to hunker down for now. But first, you must stand in line for the elevator with everyone else. You may not have known that lines for elevators was a thing. In some special places, they are. Ideally, the room service will arrive before the children start gnawing on bed sheets, delivered not by a well-dressed porter pushing a tablecloth trolley, which the movies in your imagination had promised, but instead handed across the threshold in an ordinary brown paper bag by a man in near-athletic apparel emblazoned with the hotel chain's logo, who's on another floor before the door even closes. In this instance is the 4th of July, of course. Fireworks are a national promise, and they pop off without a hitch. Oh, say can you see? The darkened hotel room fills with bursts of sparkling light, and finally the giggles of children as the grand finale kicks into high gear, popping and sputtering and shimmering with a breathless and unrivaled energy. After passing a framed, painted portrait facsimile of the corporate chain's intrepid founders, one of them clutching a rolled-up set of building plans, hanging in the passage between towers, sleep comes easily after all, deep in the clutches of the Marriott family of hotels. All should be quiet. The war has been won once more. At daybreak we retreat.
Good versus Evil, from July 18, 2024.
Over the Memorial Day weekend this May, deep in the redwoods of Northern California, whilst drinking a very nice local beer, I quietly acknowledged a personal milestone. It had been exactly 25 years since I first moved to the US from Australia. It was a memorable chapter, obviously, and I often think about how life was in those first months of my new existence. The year 2000 was just around the corner. Y2K bug fears were growing fast via breathless TV news reporting, yet the calamitous federal election of George W. Bush and its infamous hanging chads seemed a long way away. Not that I was following politics very closely. All news reached my oldest brother and I via printed copies of the Los Angeles Times or the boxy black TV jammed into one corner of our living room. Mostly we tuned into Lakers games though, with the unrivaled combination of Shaq and Kobe on their way to the first of 3 consecutive NBA championships. We went to a handful of games and a lot of gigs, a hell of a lot of gigs. Every now and then I take out the old ticket stubs I've held onto and can't quite believe just how many gigs. By the end of 2000, my internship had turned into a string of production jobs with MTV Networks. I was on to my second immigration visa and drove down to San Diego after Christmas to spend time with the family of the woman who would eventually become my wife. I was 24 years old and life was in full swing. My brother and I were talking seriously about moving out of the family house we had been sharing by Venice Beach. He had finally saved enough to buy his own place, and I was ready to go it alone and rent something small, closer to the music venues I'd begun regularly playing. As for the Y2K bug scare, it had come and gone without incident. Computers continued to function normally. For me, that meant work, mostly. research and correspondence for silly TV shows, as well as the occasional email between friends and family back home. Little did I know that further north in California, the real threats of a computer-centric world were quietly gestating. By my 25th anniversary, amongst the redwood trees, I was going through a kind of separation from technology that has become almost mandatory once in a while for any thinking, feeling modern soul, often referred to as a digital detox. I hadn't taken it that far, but out there the cell phone network is patchy, and being so absorbed in nature, screens seem less vital and alluring anyway. Still, news reaches us, anywhere. If I had $1 for each time my wife, head down over her phone, has casually mumbled to me in a gentle tone of shock that a celebrity has just died, we'd be living like one. She typically receives such information via a ceaseless volley of notifications that she is oddly reluctant to switch off in her phone's settings. I'm the opposite, opting for little more than being alerted to texts and phone calls. Even emails seem intrusive half the time, so they're off too. Recently, my relationship with the Do Not Disturb setting has blossomed also. Still, news reaches us, and on the way to a neighbour's religious ceremony this past weekend, I received a cryptic text from my eldest brother about Donald Trump being shot at. It didn't take many clicks to fill in the missing information. Now the car, full of well-dressed family, worrying about a lack of snacks and whether we'd make the event on time, were talking about the very latest breaking news. More bad news at that. A quick conversation about political violence ensued before our attention turned to finding a parking space. The text kept coming, of course. One was from my middle brother who asked, "What the hell is going to happen in the US now?" It's a good question, and one I've been asking myself consistently for most of the past 25 years, especially with the knowledge that I'm privileged enough to have the choice to simply move to another rich country with free healthcare and far fewer guns. But I don't. I stick it out here instead, first alone, but for my oldest brother, then with my wife, and now with our young family. So on the occasion of this latest American emergency, I was in a stranger's backyard, surrounded by our neighbours and their friends and family from around the world, about to welcome 5 children into the embrace of an ancient religion called Zoroastrianism, the core belief of which is that life is a battle of good versus evil, that humans, having free will, shall forever be choosing a side, moment to moment, day to day, year to year. The children, sitting cross-legged on a makeshift stage over a swimming pool, dressed in traditional garb, were, of course, pledging to do good, after which they were sprinkled with rose petals before we all ate Indian food and tacos and sweet things. Kids took over the dance floor while I had my fill of churros. When the DJ played Miley Cyrus's Party in the USA, I wondered if I'd ever see my daughter look so happy again. I've never been a dancer, much to the chagrin of my ex-ballerina wife, so I took my usual post off to the side of the floor and let my eyes roam the crowd. Women in saris, a neatly dressed Indian family with London accents, the mandatory Southern Californian get-together older white guy with a goatee and a bowl cap, a black family from our street who I met when the daughter unexpectedly called out to mine by name, our neighbours' Latino high school pals necking Modelo's, countless other folks I never had a chance to talk to, seemingly from all walks of life, and one overdressed white Australian bloke not dancing. No one mentioned the news, not a soul. I only recall seeing phones out so that people could capture photographs. My brother's question was still on my mind, but I tried not to think about all the things wrong with America. Instead, I reflected on all the things that aren't, all the reasons I've hung around for more than 2 decades, becoming a citizen in the process. In those moments, I sometimes reflect on the Obama years, the president under whom I swore my oath of allegiance, and the closest Gen X has come to finally taking over. A president who was so eloquent in summarising America's achievements, particularly in its long quest for a truly multicultural union. His remarks in Selma, Alabama on the 50th anniversary of the Freedom Marches often come to mind. Again, I try to remind myself that America does swing between these vastly disparate political poles, even if it takes longer than is easily identifiable at digital speeds, sometimes a generation. My reverie was short-lived. The children whizzed by me, one way and then another, with their newly anointed friends from across the street, asking for soda and candy and anything else they might not normally get their hands on so easily. Then, very briefly, just to see her smile, I got off my ass and danced horribly with my wife.
"1900s Guy" from July 25th, 2024.
On the way to another day of summer camp with my kids and 2 friends this week, the boy from across the street schooled me on Star Wars villains, mostly stormtroopers, which he seems particularly interested in. "I love the bad guys," he told me. He's a sweet kid, but immediately I sensed his affinity, recalling the many times he hasn't listened to a darn word I'd said. Still, having grown up on 80s movies, I was hooked. As the rest of the car fell silent and he broke down the difference between Storm, Scout and Flame Troopers, I began to lose track of which films contained which. Star Wars movies follow an uncommon chronology, the saga's middle 3 chapters having been made before the first 3, and whatever you want to call the more recent avalanche of multi-platform, mixed media, CGI, cash-ploughing exercises, making it very hard to distinguish new parts of the story from old. "The ones made in the 1900s, he finally said by way of distinction. I felt like he'd plunged a buzzing red lightsaber straight through my heart. "I was born in the 1900s, you know," I said. A gentle scoff emanated from the back seat. Then the lesson continued. "Kids make you feel old all the time, but that one really got me. Even the 20th century would have sounded better than 1900s. At least when the phrase was coined, it was synonymous with the future. With our president recently conceding that he may be a little past the job at hand, age has been on the mind lately. I've been wondering how you know when something's moved past you. It's easy to know when blockbuster movies aren't aimed at you anymore. At some point, I just stop relating to the main characters completely and start to feel like I've heard the story structure they exist in 1,000 times before. I grow bored and move on. But in life, the signs are more subtle. It's harder to gain perspective without the benefit of a neatly tailored story on a 50-foot screen. Jerry Seinfeld once offered a clue in clothing, proposing that all fathers dress as they did in the last good year of their lives. It's a funny minute or so bit. Here's a link. I don't know if I could pinpoint it that easily myself, yet I have noticed that to a certain degree I've stopped trying. Jean styles are a great measure. I see they're rising and widening again. Through my youth I went 501, naturally, very 1900s, then bootcut into something more roomy, before jumping on a more slim, but not skinny, fit that I've been good with for countless seasons since. Was I following fashions? Probably, but it didn't feel like that. You just go with the flow when you're young. Socks are another tell. At some point, what I always knew as socks became specifically labelled crew socks. Everything else, and the prevailing trend apparently, is little more than a weird swim cap for people's feet, invisible above the shoe line. So much for the old gentleman's rule of saving your ankles for the beach. These are trivialities, I know. Still, they get me thinking. The world moves on, we know it. To kids, my first 23 years of life are locked in a glass case, labelled 1900s. To a certain extent, they are for me too. You can't go back. So even if it is only about Star Wars, I try more and more to just listen, to glimpse the future. Neil Young, the man who became most famous for a song called Old Man, put it well on the 2002 track When I Hold You in My Arms. Well, the older generation, they got something to say, but they better say it fast, or get out of the way. It's an unexpectedly pretty song from a middling career point album that perfectly encapsulates the struggle between holding on to what you know and love while also welcoming change. In recent years, Logan Roy from the TV show Succession came to exemplify the old boomer who simply can't do just that. Unable to trust the younger set or move on until, spoiler alert, sudden heart failure in the toilet of a private jet finally and ignobly does the job for him. Each day I'm closer to being the older generation. As my fellow Gen Xers and I continue to wait our turn to be in charge, I'm ever aware that the window between the generation after us and the end is narrowing. So I can't deny that it was refreshing this past weekend to see our most prominent member of the older generation finally get out of the way. Maybe some others will take his lead and bow out gracefully. Before you know it, time will be up for the rest of us 1900s guys too. I better speak fast.
Well, there you have it. That's the stories from this month's TBH with Toby B. Hemingway. Substack, that's me. Please subscribe to the Substack at tbhemingway.substack.com. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening all the way through. I hope you enjoyed the stories. Our theme song is by me and my old band, Horse Stories. You can hear all that stuff on the streaming services, and all the little guitar parts in between are just me noodling around in the office. Thanks again for listening, and you'll hear from me next month.